Hey everybody, welcome back to the Overcoming Codependency series. Today we're going to be talking about managing my expectations. So this is a big old juicy one because people love their expectations, people love their certainty, people love their control, right? So managing expectations is actually what we're going to be talking about today is letting go. How to let go and just let God and let life happen and on life's terms, right? So anyway, I'm excited about this topic today because this is something that I am in the thick of. I'm learning how to let go, and believe it or not, it's actually going quite well. But I have these times where I'm just like, I'm wanting to grab onto something, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't want to let go, and I'm freaking out. But for the most part, it's been pretty good. So biggest thing around expectations is to understand what expectations are. So expectations are simply a desire of how you want something to play out, right? It's a mental desire. It's, I've thought this through and I see it playing out this way and I need to make sure it happens this way. That's an expectation. And when we place those on our partners feel smothered, our partners feel boxed in, and they do not want to comply. Because think about it, when people put expectations on you, how does that make you feel? Right? It makes you start to question your worth. It makes you start to question if you're good enough because somebody's putting something onto you that they feel that you need to turn out to be, right? And so what we need to learn to do as a codependent person or an anxious attached person is we need to learn how to turn our expectations into boundaries. Okay, I've talked to you guys in the past about the difference between the two. I'm gonna revisit it because I think it's very important. An expectation is you telling somebody how to treat you when you're likely not treating yourself that way. So you're looking outside yourself for something to play out in a way that you're not able to meet that need for yourself. This is why we become anxious, because we set an expectation out, we're not treating ourselves that way, so we're putting all the control into somebody else's hands to meet our needs, right? That feels very unsafe for an anxious person, to give your control fully over. So if you're able to meet your needs yourself, and then ask for somebody to treat you a certain way, that's different. That's what we classify as a boundary, right? So when you say to somebody, this is how I need to be treated because this is how I treat myself, way different, right? Because then you are vibrating in that energy. You are radiating that energy, and the person already knows how to treat you because they're watching you treat yourself that way. Right? But how can somebody show up and treat you the way you want to be treated when you're not treating yourself that way? Because you're also not being a role model to yourself and to them to show you how to treat you, right? So boundaries are so crucial. And if this is something you struggle with, there's so much great literature out there that you can read on boundaries and how to set boundaries. Man, it's a game changer once you learn how to set boundaries. Okay, so. Knowing that that expectations are an attachment to an outcome through desire, through hope, through these constructs that we start to create in our mind of how we need things to play out, we're always setting ourselves up for disappointment, right? Because we're saying things have to play out this way, and if they don't, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to be content. So we, as anxious people, are addicted to certainty. We're addicted to control. We're addicted to codependency, right? We need other people to reflect back to us who we are and our worth. So the key on this journey is going to be to learn to let go. Okay? So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my journey with letting go and how I have got myself to a place where I'm starting to feel comfortable with letting go. I'm not comfortable. I'm starting to feel comfortable with letting go because this has been something I've been playing out for so long, my whole life basically. And it all started, I used to be really, really good as a child in my own energy, in my own essence. And I was a fun-loving, crazy child, always doing crazy things. And my parents split when I was 8, and that immediately that day, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was very much felt like my world just spun upside down. Everything changed. And really at the end of the day, life as I knew it would never be the same. and I don't mean that as a victim. I mean that as like, it's just that's the course that I'm on. That's the journey and the life that I am partaking in, and what I've been called on this planet to be on. So I'm actually grateful for all this stuff, to be honest. So in that moment, I knew that things were going to be completely different. I knew that my whole family was going to be changing, all that sort of stuff. And I remember, I don't think I consciously made this deal with myself, but I subconsciously made this deal with myself and maybe wasn't aware of it. But I said to myself, I am never, ever going to let somebody impact me the way that my parents did here, because I felt so out of control. And I was like, how can this be? Like, how can somebody else's choices impact me so much? So I started to learn how to say to everybody and everything that could have any influence on me. I completely shut down. I would not allow myself to experience that feeling ever again. So that brings me all the way through a drug addiction, all the way to 25. I'm just gonna skip that whole chunk because that's a whole other video. And to around 25, that's when my spiritual journey started. That's when I learned heart opening. That's when I learned, just even the concept of learning to let go, but I didn't let go. I developed a spiritual practice. I got into counseling and doing all this work, and it was beautiful, but I still didn't know how to let go. Surrender. That was a very yucky word for me. I didn't like it because I was like, why would I surrender? Why would I let somebody else have control over my being or how I feel? So the revelation in all this is knowing that no matter what, if you can hold space for yourself, people will not have control over your feelings, because they will be able to instigate a feeling in you, right? But you at the end of the day are going to be able to hold space for yourself when that feeling comes up, and you'll be able to disintegrate that. So I didn't learn that skill as a child. All I learned was that somebody can come in and they can throw my world for a frenzy and not clean it back up, because I didn't know how to clean it up. So the key is to learn to hold space for yourself, to learn to soothe yourself if and when, because it's going to happen, people stir your pot, right? So part of the journey for me is learning how to, well, and I guess for me, I had to start with baby steps, because learning how to start to change habits is one of them, because as anxious people, we tend to be more rigid. We tend to be perfectionists. We like things a certain way, right? We don't like our environments to change because it creates discomfort for us. So one of the things that you can start to do is practice changing your environment, right? Because it's harder to change thinking than it is to change environment. So what we want to do is we want to look at our homes. We want to look at the routes to work that we're taking. We want to start to invite new into our lives, because what we're doing as anxious people is we're spending too much time in the past, right? So the past is filled with memories, and the past is filled with things we're attaching to the present. And we're actually really just living in past moments, but in the present state, right? So as we start to change these things in our environment, we start to see, okay, these cues, because what we do as human beings is we actually attribute cues in our environment to certain things in our being, right? So if I see something in my environment that reminds me of thoughts that I think that I don't like about myself, those cues trigger me, right? So when we change up our environment, we're actually changing habits, we're changing thinking and everything, because we're actually changing the triggers to the cues in our thoughts, right? And then that's going to change the triggers and the cues that we feel. So as we start to shift things in our environment and surrender things to change, we start to understand that, like, there's a difference in having to feel out of control and actually being in control of our change. Okay, so being open to change is a big part of this process, because it will shift the anxiety, because as we get better at allowing change to happen, we get better at dealing with our anxiety. Okay, so And then as we start to move through some of this stuff, we can therefore go into our being, right? Into our mind, into our heart, and we can start to play with some of these anxious thoughts that are arising for us. So as far as when it comes to letting go, it's going to be, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but it's going to be a little bit of an I don't give a shit attitude toward yourself, because we have been attaching so much to outcome that we have to literally kind of swing to the other end of the pendulum, which is the kind of I don't give a shit attitude, and you have to let things roll. Like water off a duck's back, right? That's the saying. So you got to let things kind of roll, and roll with some of the resistance that you're feeling without trying to act on it. Okay, so how long can you sit with the anxiety or the discomfort when your partner leaves, right? When they go hang out with their friends and you're immediately in this anxious frenzy. How long can you sit with that? And how long can you practice rolling with that resistance that's happening in your being and breathing into this energy that's happening inside of you? You don't need to judge it, right? We don't need to judge it as good or bad. We need to just breathe into it, and we need to allow it to pass, because what's happening is our mind has created an expectation of how we need things to play out, or how we think things are going to play out, and then we start to get into a bit of a panic or in a bit of a frenzy. So the key is going to be to learn to let that go through breath, and learning some of the skills that I taught in managing the mind, right? Is the one-pointed concentration. How can I bring my mind back, my consciousness back to my centeredness, right? Which is in your being, in your body, in your being. So this is going to be a big part of managing expectations for you, and learning to let go is being in the body. Okay, so this is going to be a big journey for you, and it's going to be a beautiful journey for you, because as you start to get more comfortable with being in your body and spending time there, you're going to start to realize that the craziness of the mind is just, it's really just constructs that you've created based off of past experiences. That's it. That's what your mind is. Your mind is just this entity in your being that is holding on to what it knows, to what it's been through, because it's trying to preserve you. But if you can let go of the expectation that you need to be preserved, you're going to realize that there's nothing to preserve once you learn to just enter your being and be with yourself. Because in that state, nobody has control over you. Nobody has you don't need expectation in that state, because you're not measuring anything up against anything else. You're just being. You're in your body, you're in your energy. So definitely recommend sitting with yourself. Start with 5 minutes a day, and just try your best to just ground yourself. That's what this is all about. So if you need to put music on and just sit and focus on the music, great, do that. But you need to find ways that you can start to manage the mind, because that's really where you're going to be able to get into this place where you can let go of expectation and let go and just surrender to trust and faith that you are exactly where you need to be, and that everything is unfolding in your life exactly as it's meant to. That's a really beautiful place to be, and it's all here, right? So the less time you can spend in here, the more time you can spend in here, the better off you're going to be.